So I work for an independent housing foundation that works around the world. And for the last 40 years, we've ran a competition with UN Habitat to find and share the best housing solutions. We heard today about some of the challenges, particularly in rural areas. And what we found over 40 years is that rural communities innovate. They find ways to create the housing that is so needed. And community-led housing is one of the key solutions that is often used. So it's great to kind of do a very quick overview of community-led housing and why it's so important. Second slide, please. So for us, although there are lots of models, and I am going to talk about some of the models briefly, why people go down community-led housing route, why this model is so important and used by so many, is because of all the benefits that come from communities taking charge of their own housing. So what we see is that community-led housing ensures that houses are built for real local need of the local population. They often tackle affordability issues, and that's one of the key reasons we find rural communities look to develop their own housing. They see the problem and they feel that they can be part of that solution. And really, it's an important way, as we heard earlier, about young people remaining within the local population, but also for older people as needs change. We find that it's very important in terms of community resilience, so that communities themselves gain a greater sense of ownership and cohesion, and they strengthen local networks. And you can see there in that picture, this is a French rural example that I wanted to share with you of a cooperative, an eco-friendly rural project. And you can see housing 29 people of all ages from 1 to 74 years old. This community has its own spaces, but also has its own homes that it's developed together. We also find that often the community-led housing is very sustainable in terms of how everything is done, from the first eco-friendly designs, where the housing is, the size of the housing, all the way through to making sure that there is sustainable land use and that people really think about the needs of the local community. And finally, it often boosts local economy. We tend to find it's local builders and suppliers and tradespeople that get involved in community-led housing projects, and that keeps the investment and the finance within the local community. Next one, please. Now, there are many different types of community-led housing. And I just, again, wanted to kind of run through them because you've already heard about a few, and we've seen the full range. And the thing that's very important for us is how adaptable these different models are. So first of all, here is a picture of a co-housing project developed by a group of older women who wanted to live together. So co-housing is about shared community spaces, as well as having your own space, your own house within that, but governing together. And these women came together and developed a really important project, the first in the UK for older women, of 25 affordable homes, some of which were owner occupied and some of which were for rent. We also see housing cooperatives, and we heard about some of those this morning. So where residents collectively own and manage the property, ensuring affordability through a non-profit structure. So another really important model that we see across Europe and elsewhere in the world. The next one, self-help housing, slightly different again. This is where empty properties, so next slide, are refurbished and brought back into use. So we heard earlier about the number of properties that are in a poor state of repair and empty in communities that desperately need affordable housing. Self-help housing is usually run by an NGO that will purchase properties, refurbish them, and then rent them back to local people, often using opportunities for training and volunteering within that. Community land trusts are a really interesting example where it's actually the community that's holding the land in trust, usually for housing, but also for other types of community facilities. And that's held in trust for perpetuity, so forever, in terms of keeping affordable rents and community facilities available locally. So an important land lock. And finally, self-build. So we've seen some really amazing projects where people have worked in their local communities using underused land or buildings and actually building their own homes. And finally, before we get on to hearing about some more examples, Really, community-led housing is global. So I could give you my final slide, lots of examples from all around the world about how all of those models have been used differently. And the reason for that is they're very flexible approaches and very scalable. But the main thing, and we heard about some of those barriers earlier, is having supportive policies and funding. So these discussions at an EU level are incredibly important to make sure that community-led housing is recognised for its value and that communities are given the right policies and funding to enable them to develop. One of the big things that we find makes a huge difference, and that's why I was delighted to be involved today, is knowledge sharing and networks. We've heard from some amazing people who have expert knowledge that they can share with others. We have found one of the biggest boosts to community-led housing is being able to tap into existing groups who've already been there and are willing to share their expertise, and having peers, communities that are working on the same issues together. It's not easy. If it was, you'd already be doing it, but it is possible. And there are lots of community groups and networks out there who would like to help. And a big thing for us is partnerships with municipalities and landowners. They're a key part of community-led housing working well. And we've got some great examples of municipality support, of other housing associations and housing providers working with communities, but also interested landowners who want to make a difference in their community. I've put you a little map there. And a website. So Cohabitat is a global network. It's been running for about 10 years of communities developing community-led housing all around the world. You can also visit our website, World Habitat, where we can show you lots of case studies and we'll put you in touch with people. And if you're interested in one of those models I've mentioned, most of them have a group that can provide technical support. So do get in touch with myself if you can't find the information that you're interested in. But, you know, if you're not already involved in community-led housing, there's an amazingly vibrant group of people out there working on this. And I've always found they're incredibly willing to share what they're doing. That was my whistle-stop tour.
Thank you very much, Louise. No, but I think it's very important. There are like concrete groups that are supporting all these models. Different ones, you said, they have like this really this potential for adaptability and to be moved. Of course, we might discuss in a minute barriers, legal community, etc. Let's pause this. But there is this opportunity. There is this network. Perhaps you also want to put the hyperlink in the chat if anybody's interested in a more concrete model to be tested in their territory. There you have to for where to start. So I think this is really important partnership that you shared. And you mentioned that this global phenomenon. There are many cases, and you have your map, but you also have your awards that we were also like disseminating, happily to disseminate in the Rural Pact. And actually we have invited to present also very briefly to one of those awarded examples so that we go deeper into another concrete model on community-led housing. So I think that Annegret, morning, thank you for joining. This is going to be the last intervention before we go to the mirror and discuss. But Annegret, welcome, and can you tell us a bit more on this awarded example on community-led housing that you have created in Austria?
Yeah, so thanks for having me and thanks for inviting me. And yes, actually, we as einszuein Architektur, we recently won the World Habitat Award 2025 in bronze, which was a very big honor. Last week we had the celebration and we are very pleased. So thanks again for that. So why did we win the award? It's our office, einszuein Architektur. We are Vienna based and I'm an architect. And next slide, please. In our work, we are focusing on social housing. So next slide, please. The three main focuses we have in our work is co-creative planning processes, multi-story timber constructions, or in general, building as ecological as possible, and also the transformation of existing buildings. But what our prize was all about was our work with co-housing projects. Yes, what you see here is one of our co-housing groups we are working with. So the special thing about doing this is to have the group of the future inhabitants in the planning process from the very, very beginning. So what you see here is the co-housing group Gleis 21. We won the competition for the site in Vienna, and the first thing they did, they were like entering their site. So this was the start of the project. And next slide, please. What our work is all about is, in the first, we start with dreaming. So the group starts to dream about what their vision for their future home is. And after we created this vision, which is kind of the guiding star through all of the project and all of the planning process, we start planning, deciding, and in the end, building together the future home. Next, please. So in the end, a group of people which has worked and discussed and quarreled and laughed and celebrated together for some years, moves into, as a community, moves into their newly built or newly renovated house. Next, please. So why do you do this, or what are the benefits? There are actually a lot of benefits. First of all, it's being part of one of these groups is very self-empowering. People develop democratic skills and they get into their strength, so to speak. They develop a lively community, not only a house community, but also when they move into the new houses, the house also starts to, I like to put it like, to shine into the neighborhood. Because the people normally, when they create their vision, they don't want to have the good life for themselves only, but also to contribute something to their neighborhoods, to their future neighborhoods. So there are shops, there are food co-ops, there are some very, very many spaces, community spaces that are also shared with the neighborhood. It's all about sharing in general. It's about sharing of responsibilities. It's about sharing of resources. It's about sharing of goods as well. So and it's also about affordability. So we made most of our projects. We finished 10 and we are now building our 11th and 12th building, one co-housing building. 2 of those are in the rural areas. One of them is the Wohnprojekt Hasendorf. It's situated in Hasendorf, a small village outside of Vienna, where like 50 people, grown-ups and children are living there at the moment currently. Next, please. Yeah, that's another impression, but the project I want to talk about today more in detail is, next, please, is the Wohnprojekt Auenweide. It's also in a small village, situated in a small village in St. André-Wördern. And there are 25 individual apartments situated in 8 houses and 300 square meters of common rooms. Next, please. Yeah, also a little impression. Next, please. Yeah, what you see here are these 8 houses I was talking about. So the 8 squared houses are the houses where the people live in. In each house, there are up to 3 flats situated. And those 2 round things you see on the right-hand side is the community space. Next, please. For the group, as I said before, the vision was, this is the first thing we developed together with the group. Their vision was not only to be a lively community, but also to live as sustainable as possible. And they also wanted to build the house as sustainable as possible. So this is why we have a wooden house here. Just 1 second back, please. We have a wooden house which has a straw insulation, and the people also wanted to have a clay plastering on the inside, but they couldn't afford to do this, to make somebody else do it. This is why they did it by themselves, which you see in the far right, in the right corner below. Yes. I think they wouldn't do it again. It was a lot of work, but they did it. So if you remember the plan, there are these 8 houses, and these community houses in the center. There's a center space, which holds a playground and which is kind of the center of this small settlement. Next, please. And as Frederick, I think, said before, co-housing is also about sharing, and it's about minimizing your private space and maximizing the shared space as well. So in case of Auenweide, we have two community buildings. This is the community building which is also shared with the neighborhood. It's a big round room you can rent, and where also some activities happen, concerts, stuff like this, and also workshops. Yes, so it's also for the neighborhood usable. Next, please. And there are also spaces which are only for the house community. So we have, of course, always a centerpiece of those projects is a community kitchen, where, of course, every flat has its own kitchen, but there's one big community kitchen which can be used for like cooking together, having parties and stuff like this. And there's also a children's playroom and a room for the teenagers and stuff like this, a library. Yeah. Next, please. Yeah. So this is the co-housing group, the Auenweide, after they moved in. And yes, so what I want to say is it starts with the people and it ends with the people. And it's for me as an architect, it's the best way to plan, not for the people, but with them. And it makes a big difference. So next, thank you very much.
Thank you, Annegret. Thank you for putting a face or many faces behind what we are speaking when it's community-led, and it encompasses many aspects, sustainability, democracy, etc.